Uh, what date is it? Okay. This is Plan Stage Weekly Meeting, August the 19th, 2020. Gabe, you're up. You have the first item.
Sweet. Had a great demo with customer opportunity, not gold customer yet, on Monday. And they gave us a pretty good set of requirements for what they were looking for in a planning solution. And they would be the largest opportunity if we were to win it, that would land into gold solely because of plan. So I just wanted to share that requirement stock with folks so they could look at it and kind of see what an ideal customer expects versus what we currently provide. There's a couple like obvious gaps, like custom fields and more robust workflows, but it was really nice that they're even considering us over Jira, Align, and Jira, which I think is a pretty big accomplishment. And so I just want to say kudos to everyone who's been working hard, number one, but also just spread the word that that is there. It's worth looking at. There's already existing issues for all of those things. They're all on a roadmap. But yeah, that's about it. Alex, did you want to verbalize your comment?
Yeah, I think you've already covered it. I was wondering if, from the doc, from a quick look, it looked like we have all of it covered, at least in the plan, like in the medium plans or what we're planning to work on, where we already have the features. I was wondering if there is something that like some asks that would require a bigger lift or something that we need to plan for, like for a longer term or something like that.
Yeah, so I think most of the features themselves were on the on our medium term, short and medium term roadmap anyways. So that was good news. The thing that continued to provide ongoing validation that our groups and products is not extensible enough or not really flexible enough was there as well, because they were talking about how they wanted to separate some sort of like how they manage their repositories from how they manage their issues, largely because they do least privilege access. So they basically have a whole group hierarchy that is just for permissions that they then share into the specific projects or groups that need access to specific resources. And so this kind of leads into the next point that I had is just a quick update on the simplified groups and projects working group that I've been participating in with some other folks. I documented some kind of the two root cause problems that I think are longer term things to solve within GitLab itself. And that's interacting with objects across top level groups and sibling hierarchies. So can I have an issue in one group belong to an epic that's in another group outside of the hierarchy? Things like that, because the way it works right now is that you can't have a good, the person who's doing the product management or planning can't see what their team is working on spread out across all these different repositories and groups. And then the other one is the duplication that exists currently between projects and groups. There's a whole list of features that people want either at the project level or at the group level. And so like, does it make sense to merge those into one thing? But I jotted down all the use cases that I could think of that we've been exploring in the working group, as well as like some working proposals that were bouncing around. But I really wanted to open that up to everyone in the plan stage to contribute towards that vision for what the solution would be, because I think this call is filled with people far smarter than myself. And we also have some other engineers and designers from other groups like Manage and Create that are also collaborating here too. So that's the update on that. But I think if we were to solve, simplifying the two problems, or I mean, solving the two problems that are in that issue, and then building out those medium-term features, I think we'd be in a very, very competitive spot for the long run.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, I thought I'd do a similar update just on, because I know these things can happen like in silos almost. Like, so I wanted to make sure the rest of the team was aware of the progress that we've made with the real-time working group. So I've put a link to our working group page in the doc. But basically, like, we've shipped anyone. I mentioned in the doc here in the agenda that small clusters or single instance self-hosted customers can use the feature. In reality, any customer that's prepared to run Action Cable in embedded mode can use this new feature. It's just most likely to be customers with small clusters or single instances who self-host. You can also try this out on dev.gitlab.org. I promise you, once you've tried it and you've seen assignees update in real time, it'll never feel right that they don't update in real time. We are like trying to kind of help with the work to bring this into GitLab.com and onto larger and into larger clusters for self-hosters, but we have to go through Kubernetes for .com, and we're somewhat blocked with the work and the distribution and delivery teams on that basis. Yeah, the question has arisen, like, do we want to continue to create more features while we kind of deliver this to .com, or do we want to refactor how we're currently doing it, because it's very much like technically an MVC. So if you'd like to contribute, I've linked the discussion for that. It's on the epic, I think one of the epics we use to track the work. So you're very welcome. If you have any views here, I'd love to hear them. Shall allow that silence to tell its own story. Alex, you have the next item.
Yeah, so I was wondering about if we're doing any sort of workflow changes or what's being different after the slippage issue that has been raised. And actually, I'd like to more of kind of, I understand slippage is bad, but at the same time, I think it's kind of, it's sort of normal, especially when you plan aggressively, so to say, which is one of the GitLab's value, right? To go to last, and then rather than predictability and plan aggressively. So I'm just trying to. I would like to understand better. Is this something that we internally as a team want to become better at planning? Things that we want to cover in next release, or is it? Or I mean, and it's probably also a factor of being more predictable in sense of communicating what we are going to release in one of the releases and not moving stuff from one milestone to another. Is it both? Is it more on one or the other side? Because like for the external communication, I think we can handle that in a slightly different way where we can use more the feature flags, and then we can kind of have that tested. You even use GitLab.com as a test environment, so to say, as a production-ready test environment, and then raise the feature flags, or remove the feature flags, and that will be going into the next release. But that doesn't solve the internal planning as for our team internal planning problem. So yeah, I'm not sure if I was clear enough. There's a lot of thoughts in my head. Not sure if I was communicating clear enough. That yeah.
Yeah, and Alex and I talked about this yesterday some, and thinking about not specifically like the release post or the kickoff videos, but like marketing blog posts that sort of like make or set expectations for something that will be in a release or in the next few releases. Is it part of the, I don't know, like practice around that, how those things become, marketed. But we talked a bit about like if we had, if something was feature complete or code complete on GitLab behind a feature flag, it doesn't necessarily need to be like public and generally available, and then we say like, hey, this is going to be coming in the next release. Then we have like 99 to 100% confidence that it lands in a well-tested state. Like, has that ever been, and I know that, how marketing works versus how product and engineering work is always the like eternal war, I guess. But like, how do things get sort of like bubbled up into marketing blog posts?
I can speak a little to that. So the way the process works now is like we're supposed to, as a cross-functional team, the first few weeks of each month, talk about what we want to commit to or what we plan to ship in a given release. And so like product drafts issues, this is like our timeline workflow thing that's in the handbook, but product drafts issues and spends a week discussing with engineering. Then we do the release kickoff video for each group, and then that gets rolled up to Eric Brinkman, who then does a dev section overview during the release kickoff live stream. So that happened yesterday. And then that usually sets the expectations of things that will happen. And I think, like, from my opinion, the reason why I care about the slippage, I like planning ambitiously, but I've come to realize that our stakeholders, external stakeholders and customers, follow our issues pretty closely, especially for the things that they really want and need. And when they see like a milestone on something, and they see that we're working on it, and then it just goes from one milestone to the next milestone and the next milestone, it started to hurt the trust that our customers have with our other stable counterparts in like technical account management and customer success. And so it makes it harder for them to maintain a healthy longer term relationship, because, you know, if they have problems and we're working on solving them and we say that they're going to be solved in this time frame, and then we repeatedly like don't do that, it kind of chips away at a little bit of that trust. So I think that's where, back to Alex's point, we could have things feature complete or code complete behind a feature flag and test that. That's one way to do it, and not that we should explore that. And I think the other, from a process standpoint, is looking at our velocity over the last n number of milestones and understanding what we have historically delivered, and then basically committing to 60% less of that so that we leave slack in the system. Right now, like for example, in 13.3, we were in the project management group, we had 200 something plus % of our historical capacity planned for that milestone. And while it's good to plan aggressively, I think we also have to take into consideration, if we build slack into the system, the system will move faster. It'll be healthier. Just from a systems like thinking standpoint, the most inefficient systems are the ones that are always operating 100% capacity. So there's a really cool book called Slack about this whole theory, which I recommend reading, but that's my perspective.
I just like to echo what Gabe said there really quickly, because I've had a lot of customer conversations now, like requirements management things, as they're introduced to the idea of it. They're thrilled by the idea of it. And the number one question I get is, when will this feature be done? And I'm loath to give them actual dates, because again, that's not how we like to plan here. We like to plan sort of in a natural progression. But as we approach more and more enterprises and more larger businesses, they all work on date-based timelines. And it's very hard for them if you say, well, we're looking at sometime Q1 of 2021. That doesn't really work as well for them as, oh, we have it planned for this release. But if I say we have it planned for release, I always have to hedge my bets and say, well, we plan very aggressively, so there's a good chance that it may be 1 or 2 releases later. And then they kind of look at me funny and go, oh, so when can I be guaranteed to expect it? So it's more about commitments. And I'm very happy to say to the businesses and the enterprise I'm talking to, we do plan aggressively, but we like to catch up with our slip in the next release. So if it doesn't make, let's say 13.5, then it will by de facto make 13.6. But even that I sometimes struggle to say. So it's really more about predictability and not so much speed. I'd rather move slower and be predictable when I'm talking to external customers than be super aggressive and then just see it slip multiple releases, because they do watch. It's really, I didn't think people looked at our issues as closely as they do, but they do, very much so.
Yeah, like to my point there is just that, like, yeah, I mean, you can read it. Every process change we make from the canonical standard GitLab workflow makes it more difficult to work with our stable counterparts. So, you know, the whole quad planning thing isn't something that has made the plan team. So we miss out on that sometimes. Like if we want to deliver features that are, you know, documented properly, that have proper quality, that have that are secure, and we want to leverage our stable counterparts and make it easier for them to contribute in the team, then we kind of have to be careful about the process changes we introduce that make things different from the standard process. And so that's why I'm being really pedantic in the issue about like framing the problem properly, investigating it thoroughly to find out what is the actual root cause and not just the perceived root cause. And like, what actually is the problem? Like, is it that we're, because sometimes I think like if something's going to miss the milestone, whether we say it was going to make it in that milestone or the milestone after, like, it doesn't matter, it would have missed anyway. So yeah, it's ideally any process changes we make, I think would achieve all three things. Like, they'd make it more predictable for PMs, but they'd also help to increase our velocity and improve the developer experience as well. And I think the way to do that is like the standard GitLab process is thoughtful and it works for a remote environment. So we should be careful about the process changes we make that differ from that.
Yeah, so like the why I'm raising sort of this discussion and question is because like planning and estimating is hard. Whichever way you do it, in days or in units or whichever you do it, it's hard and it's not exact. So I'm just wondering if we can move from this is what we're going to deliver in this milestone to something like this is what we're working on and this is what we can deliver, this is what we can release, and this is where the feature flags come into play, right? Because you're working on something, put it behind feature flag, test it on production. Now you know that that's ready, tested, and can be revealed. So that's what we do release in this release or in upcoming release. And that's just a matter of phrasing the feature flags. Obviously, there will be some bugs because in production, there's always something that might happen. So there is some iteration on that. But then moving from that, where you can say, well, these are the features that we know we're releasing like 99.9% because we just need to raise the feature flags, to saying that these are the next things that are highest priority in our queue and we are working on. So then this very wrong estimation kind of is sort of solved from my perspective. Maybe that's not true, but that's how I'm viewing it.
Yeah, I think that's good feedback. I can definitely start talking like that in my kickoff videos. I think all the PMs can talk like that. I think the other thing too is like the estimating is hard, and like the more time you invest in it, it becomes less valuable because like it's basically like how much more do you want to pay for the next 9, in uptime. But the thing that I have realized is that it is possible, like as long as the team kind of stays the same and estimates in the same way, it's going to be inaccurate, but consistently inaccurate, which is why I think looking at like what weight we do get done in a given milestone will help us, should help inform what we should like say that we can get done in the next milestone. The only other like process change, or I guess thing that I would be valuable is like shifting planning to the left a little bit, where like as a product manager, I want to make trade-offs about what I schedule for a milestone. And if I see like 10 different things and I know that we can only do 5 of them, or like 10 weight, I want to like see those 10 things with the weight, so that way I can pick the top 10 weight across all those issues and just do those things. So like it forces trade-off discussions before we go public and say, hey, I think we can get all these things done. And that's just where like we're running the experiment, I think, of doing continuous weighting. And I like that. We need to like have more time per week where everyone spends doing just a little bit. It doesn't have to be like a super long thing. And John, I don't know if you want to talk about your proposal for design or solution spikes and that sort of thing, but I see that as a way to help that out too.
Yeah, sure. The idea behind that was just it was kind of like an and-on cord that an engineer could pull. It's completely at the engineer's discretion. And it means that you're, by kind of going into that process, the first product becomes the design doc. So the product is no longer delivering the feature. The feature is the doc itself where you provide. So if you can imagine like the Jira importer, would be a classic example of this. The first thing that Alex did was create a proof of concept. So like design doc's just a name. It doesn't have to be a physical document. It could be a branch with a demo on it. It doesn't matter. Like what's important is that it reveals the complexity and that it's a realistic investigation of the challenge that's ahead. It's not necessary for everything, and it shouldn't really be necessary for like 90% of stuff, like just to grab a random number. It should be for the kind of small number of things where we simply don't know enough, or the engineer identifies early on that there is complexity that they can't estimate and they need more information for. It's just an idea. Like ideally it wouldn't be necessary. It's just felt like, and this is why I was particularly pedantic in the issue about this, because we took a measurement in the middle of this milestone or towards the end of this milestone. We said, well, we have this many points in the milestone, which is so far above our above what we know we can accomplish. Why is that? And the temptation is to make an assumption and say we planned more than we could accomplish. That's not necessarily true. You have to investigate and see like how many of those issues were created after the start of the milestone. So was an issue that was a weight 5 suddenly exploded into 5 issues, each with a weight 2? Because now that's double the number of points that were expected. So you have to really investigate, I think, the problem. And don't just assume that like, well, we just throw everything onto the board at the start of the milestone, we hope for the best. And there may be other things going on. As it turns out, like I did actually quantify that for the last milestone, and it wasn't the case that anything had exploded to that extent, but it's still a possibility. The other thing we don't measure is, or we don't try to measure up until now, is how much slips every month. It's incredibly difficult to measure because of the way we work. We're engineer managers on the 18th. They move everything that's not in the build phase over to the next milestone, and then we look through the stuff and we try to make an estimate of like what's in review, what's in verification. Those will probably make it, and then you have like 4 days for, so maybe half of what's in dev will make it. Like it's extremely difficult to make that, but we should at least try to measure that, I think, and see like if a PM's going to plan, sorry, I'm really belaboring this, but if a PM's like expected to plan from like the 4th of the month, how can they realistically do that? Because they have no idea at that point how much is going to carry over from the previous milestone. Like, is it going to be 30 points against the capacity of 40, or is it going to be 20 points, leaving them like twice as much room to plan stuff? So I think that's something we should probably figure out how to measure as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where like I'm wondering if we can leverage more the iterations that we're kind of implementing, because it's easier for me as an engineer to estimate a smaller amount of work, just a single issue, right, that I'm going to work this week, rather than estimate, I don't know, multiple issues for the entire release. But then that again doesn't help PMs as much. My understanding is because they do need to know what we are going to release in 4 weeks and not in 1 week. But like ideally you'd go 1 week and see what you have accomplished. And if there is a lot of work in that week that didn't make it for any reason, then you can reevaluate very easily and fast for the next week. And then you kind of move the scope of the milestone much faster. Whereas again, if you commit for something in a given milestone, a lot more will slip to the next milestone, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the another root cause, and I'll add it to the RCA is the bigger batch sizes slow everything down, like increase your cycle time and your lead times dramatically. And so smaller batch sizes is like one way to solve it. And how I've traditionally done planning in other teams and organizations is the release planning that you do once a month is like thematic, right? And then you do weekly iteration planning, and you break down vertical feature slices that you want to ship, right? So that way, by the end of 4 iterations, you might only be 50 the way done with a given feature. But if it's behind a feature flag, you can still put like some of those things in a release post, like the vertical feature slices, and make progress. And then you can also course correct like each iteration if you want to change your priorities or shift that way. So I would love to see us continue to figure out how to dog food iterations. I think to solve for that, we need to figure out how to do like efficient weekly smaller batch size planning. And I also think it'll be hard for us to adopt iterations until we get them integrated with issue boards. But the whole vision for that is to have it like if you use iterations, it will automatically measure your velocity, and eventually we want to surface that data like in issue boards when you are doing planning, so you know exactly what you can commit to based on your historical momentum, and have the tool help us instead of us just like kind of like whatever, let's hope for the best, you know. So it'd be cool to continue to figure out how to solve that as a problem, because we also have the OKR for dog fooding plan. And I think long term, I hope we build better Kanban tooling into our product, because I think that is better suited for our organization. But it would be great to dog food iterations for a while at least, to see how the smaller batch sizes helps. So if you have any ideas for that, I would jot them down the RCA too.
Cool. You mentioned you might have some project management metrics, Gabe.
Yeah, so I can share my screen and I'll like kind of walk you through what at least how the product organization right now is looking at this. There's a big push to have everything be kind of data driven based on usage. There was recently an announcement at the Product Weekly yesterday that we're shifting away from measuring how many features we ship to measuring feature adoption of our existing product, and and that's going to be measured primarily through these MAU metrics, which is for your stage, which is SMAU monthly active users, which is kind of unique users. The long-term goal for this metric is to be in SaaS and self-managed, any unique user who interacts with an issue, whether that's leaving a comment, creating it, editing it, adding a label, that sort of thing. We still have to do some implementation in self-managed to track those events and like have a union across all the different, I think 4 different tables in order to roll that up well. So right now, this is just showing the SaaS numbers. But what I've done down here is this is the SaaS group monthly active users. So users interacting with issues. It's dipped a little bit over the last few months, but it's kind of still in line with some of the basic trend patterns. But our actual blended GMAU across SaaS and self-managed is 163,812. And our target is 196,400, which is like based on a historical growth rate where we should be by the end of the quarter. Once we hit 200,000 unique users, we get bumped up an extra point in terms of like the R&D investment model. So I'm really shooting to get us above that 200 before fiscal year 22 planning starts. The thing that was interesting about this is that the growth slowed kind of considerably in self-managed. But when I looked at how many instances were reporting the usage ping, we had a net loss of 124 instances reporting, even though we had a gain of 2,901 total instances. So I don't know if those just aren't reporting yet, but either some instances turned off their usage ping. So it's like, it's not entirely accurate and reliable, but it is a good kind of indicator. So we're still trying to figure out why that happened. And then we're also tracking paid MAU, which is like which of these unique users are in paid accounts. And right now we have about 47,440 across SaaS and self-managed, which is a slight bump from June. But again, I think there's some credence to we lost usage ping data, and I'm not sure if that's because of churn or just because they turned it off. We had a bunch of new instances come online and they're not reporting any data. So kind of hard to tell there. Let's jump over here. These metrics, I don't know why that's happening. But in terms of total issues created per month, this is an interesting one that I look at. We have over 18 million created in July, which is huge, 18.5. And I think these are from a couple Ultimate accounts that I don't know what they're doing, but they are creating lots and lots and lots of issues, which is kind of cool to see. The other things that I can kind of run through here, I think going down some interesting stats just about specific features. This is weekly average users that view a board, and we're about 11,000 a week right there. And then the monthly total is about 24,300. And then in terms of milestones created, we're tracking that, and it's kind of ticking upwards. And then also we wanted to understand how much we should invest in time tracking. So you can kind of see here's the number of issues with a time estimate. We did the category maturity scorecard, and it actually dropped us down from complete to viable as a category in issue tracking, largely around small UX things. But one of them was like, how do how do you add an time estimate to an issue for a non-engineering person or a non-technical person using the quick actions was not intuitive for them. And there's no UI element for it. So that's just like a small quick win that I think we can probably do to improve that specific thing. And then the other chart that I can continue to look at and I'm interested by is this weekly feature adoption by release. And this is based on which instances are using issues and what percentage of all the instances on a given version are using issues over what time range, right? And so like based on the 4-week cycle, you can kind of see things usually start to come up, and then for a given version, they drop off after week 4 because those instances are upgrading to the next version. So this kind of downtick is normal, but each consecutive release we've had with 12.10s when we started measuring this, in the first week, it was only 28% of instances were using issues that had upgraded. Then in the first week, it went up to 31% with 13, and then 32% with 13.1, and 38 with 13.2, and then with, which is the highest jump that we've had basically in first week adoption of using issues across all instances. So like what this tells me as a product manager is that as we're iterating, we're getting better at product market fit, and we're like using issues and using some of the planning capabilities is becoming more attractive to customers, and there's a larger percentage of them that are adopting them. So I'm going to continue to track this over time, but I think it's a good leading indicator of whether or not our MAU number is going to move in the future. But there's just some highlights. Does anybody have any questions about these or the metrics?
Yeah, I have one. I just noticed from this chart, actually, it's kind of interesting. You can see that people held off upgrading from 12.10 to 13, like a whole version release. So it's interesting. Like it probably stands to the accuracy of the data. You can see there how like for 1 week, the week after the release, I think people upgraded, but for 13, it's 13.1. For 13.1, they seem to have held off on average for a week longer to upgrade.
Yep. There's an interesting thing that I've noticed when participating in some sales calls and some customer meetings with customer success is that they encourage a lot of our customers to wait a release or wait several weeks before bumping up until the first security patch comes out. So like we've talked about, there's been some discussions about how can we get our customers to upgrade faster so they get the new value faster, right? And so I think we've got to kind of combat some of our own internal messaging there and try to correct that, because I see that is the biggest thing that impacts lagging adoption rates for upgrading, which I'll talk to customer success and see how we can figure out that language. But I'm curious why we would recommend that in the first place. If you all have any ideas, I'd be interested to hear them.
Yeah, I don't know. I was going to ask as well, like, is blended GMO sorry, I can't really say that. Is that measurement? Is that adjusted for the fact that we know a small percentage of customers have usage ping switched on, or is it simply an absolute count? So in other words, like, do we multiply by 5 to estimate how many users there are self-hosting?
That's an absolute number, and so if you wanted to know that, we basically multiply what we know for just self-managed, and I can pull that up right quick, and I can share my screen right quick. So if you ever, I think I linked to this in last week's, but you can filter this by self-managed or by SaaS, and SaaS is technically a self-managed count too, but so it's kind of interesting from a data standpoint. But here we can see, let's see here. I don't think, okay, yeah, we're at 60K. So if you were to look 60K and multiply that by what, 30% have usage being turned on. So it'd be more like in the realm of 180K, 200K, that sort of thing if you were to project it out. I'm pretty sure I heard correctly yesterday that the data team or someone else, growth team maybe, is working on that calculation of what the likely users count is. I don't think that, it's just a number. The interesting thing that I've noticed is that out of all of the larger customers that use Plan that I've talked to, none of them have usage ping turned on because they're all PubSec or, and like, it's just hard to fully trust it, if that makes sense, just because like if you have the majority of your customers with usage being turned off, I feel uncomfortable making assumptions about the majority. If it was a minority, I'd feel better about it, but like 70%, I don't want to make assumptions about that. So we're looking at ways to solve that. I think one of the possibilities that's been floated around is GitLab Zero, which is like a different sort of plan where you allow usage tracking and you get more features for less money, just so we can have better data. And I'm not sure the status of that, but yeah, it's an ongoing challenge that we're trying to figure out how to solve.
Cool. Thanks. All right, I have the next item. I'll just turn my fan off so that there's not all this background noise. Yeah, so I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago that we have this test efficiency project. It's kind of orthogonal to our work. It's not our primary focus. It's a bit of fun, really. But yeah, it's been really productive. We've had MRs from outside the team remove 80,000 queries last week, which is awesome because only launched the thing on Wednesday and we were off on Friday. So yeah, that's really, really cool. The original target for the OKR was 500,000 queries. So in other words, to remove 500,000 queries from our backend pipelines. Problem with that is like the backend pipeline grows by 200,000 queries a month. So even if we achieved that in a quarter, it would still be a net increase of 100,000 queries. So we moved instead to try and reduce the average time per test, which I think will be like a kind of better long running kind of measurement. And that's on a rolling average of the last 10 measured pipelines, right? So that was actually a reduction of like 2.5%, which doesn't sound like much, but when you're running thousands of pipelines every day and that has a retail value of something like 6 cents, like it starts to add up. So we're off to a really good start. I've linked the challenge there. Anyone can contribute. Anyone, everyone. Like if you see a test that's slow, no matter how small, jump in, fix it, take the win, and we'll see how we get on at the end of the quarter. I haven't yet managed to secure a prize for the most valuable contributor, but who knows? We'll see. I have the next item as well. Like Charlie has asked me to vocalize this, so you might have heard of this. Charlie and Keenan ran the successful pilot of the product shadowing program, I guess you could call it. They met 3 times, each for a couple of hours, took notes, and they're drafting a blog post. Anyway, both of them found it really valuable. And yeah, I think we'd like to expand it to other members of the team, see if anyone else is interested. And if you'd like to pair, I think, somebody can correct me, but I think oh, it's written here. Okay. So the way to kick it off is to create an issue using that template. And I think there's an MR required to the team page as well. So if you create an issue, leave it there for your counterpart to pick up the next slot. Very similar to CEO shadowing, I guess. Yeah, and feel free to ask any questions. I'll try and answer them. Or just contact Charlie or Keenan and see how they got on.
What would anyone be able to specify like a bit more detail in what does this collaboration involve? What like I guess Charlie is the best person and Keenan is the best person to ask, but I'm just wondering, what are you expected or what are you doing in those meetings? Is it client meetings? Is it going through the issues? Is it discussing the features? Is it all of it?
The blog post that Charlie wrote up actually explains a lot of what she did as well. So I know it's still in draft, but that might be another resource given that neither Charlie nor Keenan are available in this call.
Yeah, my understanding was in the first session, like it can be split any way you want, but given the time zones and things and other reasons, like it made sense to do it in 3 tranches of 2 hours. You also like, it's more of the, I think currently it's more of the engineer shadowing the PM. So I think in the case of Charlie and Keenan tried to find 2-hour slots that were representative of the kind of broad array of tasks that a PM does. So there would have been, I guess, a customer call involved there, where you would shadow it just like you would shadow a call with Sid during the CEO shadow. Yeah, but I think there were other activities as well. And what I hear from what Charlie was mentioned the other day was that, like, yeah, that she got a really good idea of the challenges and um, that are involved in being a PM, and if it improves empathy between PMs and engineers, then all the better.
Are there any like, is it expected from both sides to draw something out of this shadowing, or like what the end result should be, or is it just sort of an exchange of experience and that's where it ends?
So I understand there's a survey at the end, and we want to measure how it's very simple at the minute. I think it just checks to see whether it was productive for both people. So whether they felt it was a good use of their time. It is being measured, not in a very, very strict way, but we would want to know that the thing actually produces some value for the two people involved.
I think it also, having done the CEO shadow, it helped me. That the outcome that I got from that was a better understanding of the organization. So I had more empathy when working with people in different parts of the organization, and was able to be more proactive and collaborating and supporting. I think for this, I would be interested in doing it largely because I also want to learn more about engineering GitLab. It's kind of like a two-way street, and I like the more that we like understand the worlds that we each live in, the less that we have silos, and that's like I think a very good outcome, if that's all it is. So.
Cool. Thanks for the question, Alex. Martin, do you want to vocalize yours?
Not really. So mine is read-only, but I'm out next week, and these are the two people covering for me for Tech Writer reviews. Russell, the previously assigned Tech Writer to Plan, who volunteered to take one group, so project management, and then Marcia is my current backup, and I'm hers for Create, so she'll take the other two groups.
Should we directly tag Russell and Marcia instead of yourself then when we need documentation input?
Unless you want to wait a week until I'm back and caught up, but yeah, feel free to CC me wherever. I'll get to those things eventually, but
Awesome, thanks. Enjoy your PTO. Okay, that's about it, I think, unless anyone has any last minute items. No. Okay, cool. We'll call it a day then. Thanks for your time. See you later. Have a great week.